Hi. Thank everyone for coming to our first Parse Developer Day. We really appreciate you guys coming out. So I'm Thomas, and today we're going to talk about push notifications. So I've worked in a number of things in my time here at Parse, and I keep on coming back to push. And I think the reason why is because push gives me the most magical moments. Whenever I'm making a side project, I always use Parse, but I don't even make a mock-up anymore because it's easier to create a fully functional Parse app with fake data. And I think sometimes I just take for granted all that's happening under the covers. But when I create a push, it's so hard to ignore the magic that's happening. When I create a message over here and receive it over here, that act of breaking down boundaries between devices and between platforms really helps express the fact that this app is beyond the scale of the one device. You understand that the cloud is there and the cloud is present. And I think sometimes we hear the word cloud so often that we really forget what it means and how much it's changed our lives and the way we consume software and the way we should think about producing it. So if we think back to when we were kids, we'd play video games all night, and our parents would knock on the door and tell us to turn it off and go to bed. We hit the power button, we turn off the game, and we forget sometimes how marvel that concept is. If I hit the power button, the princess doesn't need saving anymore. It's very existential that her plight only existed when being observed. And that's very obviously different from many games and other apps today. Today, if I don't save the princess, my friends might save her, and then they're going to get loot without me. There's going to be drama that's ensuing because the game is much bigger than it used to be. And so we should really think about that when designing our apps. How big is your app? Because we can either design an app that's confined to a 4-inch screen, or we can think much bigger and create an app where the device is merely a portal into a much larger experience. And if we're going to go for that goal, we really have to think about fundamentals a bit differently. Because remember that the cloud doesn't have a home button. The cloud is always moving. The cloud is always creating its potential for infinite content. And that really does change how we need to think about our software. Because we can either create an app that tries to leverage the infinite of the cloud to create an anxious user experience, or we can try to leverage our knowledge to make a more engaging moment. Make sure that we help the user triage what they find interesting, and then let them go when they've already consumed content that's relevant to them. This is really where the old adage comes from, that daily active users are like butterflies. If you try to hold on to them too tightly, the relationship will wither and die. But if you let them go and notify them when content's available, they'll truly be your users. And so this is what we want to talk about today, is really focusing on the engaging moments. Try to understand when content is relevant to a user and pull them into the application when it's appropriate. And this is why we focus so much on push at Parse, is because push really helps create this concept of a big app. It screams that the cloud is here. And so we did a lot of work to make sure that push is easy to get started, just like everything else at Parse. Now, there's obviously some mandatory third-party integration, but we try to make sure we give you tutorials for that, and it's also very commonly found online as well. The Parse component is very, very thin. And like everything else at Parse, our push offering is cross-platform. But that's especially important when you consider what push is. Because it's one thing to build an app that's iOS, an Android version, and Windows Phone version. But imagine if you had to build the push functionality separately for every combination of those two communication channels. Rather, with push, you just think of the concept of a push, and you send out a push. And when you send out something from iOS, it will automatically work on Android unless you just explicitly restrict it to one recipient. What's especially important about that is it means that when you've created an app on one platform and you release your second version on another, those audiences in the first iteration of your app will automatically be able to talk to people in the second iteration. That's really important for creating this fluid and seamless experience. And of course, like everything else at Parse, you can scale without skipping a beat. So you can get an app working in minutes. You can have a fully functional prototype within days, or a day. And you can scale up to tens of millions of users without having to change your backend or do any of the hard lifting. And what's great about push is there's so many diverse requirements of our users at push. And so we tried to make sure that we really design the constellation of features in a way that you can get started very simply. And that will satisfy most of our customers. But if you want a very sophisticated or tailored experience, we let you peek under the hood. And we let you fine-tune and customize what you want to do for a very, very sophisticated and sleek experience. So let's go ahead and look at how to use Parse, or push with Parse. Before we do that, we have to understand what are the components of a push. Well, with a push, you have two things. The device that's registered and wants to receive a push, and then the framework that sends it. And they communicate in Parse over what we call a channel. And a channel is like a special interest group. A channel is saying, hey, I'm interested in sports news or tech news or Parse Developer Day news. And then everyone who registers for that will receive the notice when it's published on that channel. And so we're going to look at a very broad channel push. We're going to cast a wide net for broadly applicable notices. And this is very simple to set up. In fact, all the code we need is available in our Quick Start guide. And we're going to create pushes visually. We're going to focus in our 101 just on the idea of creating a receiver of push. And we can actually use parse.com as our sender to craft messages visually. So what does it look like to set up a push? Well, let's look at the Android code really quick. So we have two lines of code, and the first one is subscribe. What this does, it takes the empty string, and that's the name of the channel. By convention, the empty string is known as the broadcast channel, and it's used for the most widely applicable notices. And what this says is if I would like to register my interest in the broadcast channel, and when I receive a notification on that broadcast channel, and a user touches on the push, launch my activity. Later, we also added increased functionality that will let you target a device regardless of their specified channels. And so the second line also catches us up and says, if I receive a push that doesn't match any of the channels I'm interested in, please launch my activity as well. So this is the code on Android. I'm actually going to walk us through a live demo on iOS. So I'm going to switch over here, and I've got a pre-baked app. Let's see. Can we switch over to the computer? Once this logs in. So we have an app that I've created in Parse, and I'm going to go try to configure this. So I will go to our settings page, if the internet will load. OK, and then under push notifications, we see Apple push certificates. This is where I'm going to upload a certificate I've created on developer.apple.com that will let Parse be able to prove that we are sending a push on your behalf. This is something we have instructions for in the tutorials, but since it doesn't make the most interesting demo, let's go ahead and upload a pre-crafted certificate. There we go. Parse is now configured to send pushes on our behalf. That's all we need to make a sender with Parse. So now let's create the receiver. So let's go ahead and be lazy like Kevin taught us and use the Quick Start guide. And we know that in the upper right-hand corner is the push guide. And the push guide is a superset of the Quick Start guide. It has those steps plus what you'd need to create a push-capable app. So we want an iOS app, and we'll start from scratch with a new project. So we're going to download a blank project. To save us some time, I've gone ahead and done that. So let's just open it up and launch that. So step one was download the SDK, or the pre-bundled version of the app. Step two, make sure we're using a good version of Xcode. Step three, copy and paste this one line into our app. We're going to paste this into the application did finish launching with options method, which for those of you who aren't familiar with iOS development, is part of the application lifecycle for iOS. There's a singleton class known as the app delegate, and that interacts with the OS to understand different lifecycle events. And application did finish launching with options is where we configure Parse setup. So by pasting this one line of code, we now have an app that knows how to speak to Parse. Now, this version of the app already comes bundled with push setup. And it does this through the built-in method for iOS, application register for remote notifications. This is a standard part of iOS development, and it just says, hey, iOS, I would like permission to send iOS notifications. This is what causes that prompt to show up on your app. Next, we had the Parse bits inside the standard receiver. Application did register for remote notification with device token. And here we have store device token, which says, hey, Parse, here's the unique identifier that will let me talk about this specific device. In the next line, subscribe to channel in background, subscribes to that same broadcast channel, the empty string. So since I have to get this running on a physical app, let's just rename this. And turn on code signing so I can get it to run on my phone. not in the simulator. And there we go. So now I have an app that's registered to receive pushes with Parse. So we did that one upload to register notifications with Parse. We used the quick start guide with one line of code to register a device to receive pushes. If we go back to the quick start guide, we can send a test push, and let's see if. Oh, I took it away just in time. There we go. So obviously, we want to send something more interesting than a test push from Parse. So let's go ahead and follow the next instructions. It says we can check out the Parse console page, or the push console page. So click on that, and we get to this page that shows us a push when it was sent, who it was sent to, how many people actually received it, and what the contents were. Up here, we can say we want to send another push. And this will let us visually compose our push, and we can decide who we want to send the push to, what we want its contents to be. Then I can check out here what it will look like on an actual device. So once we're satisfied with the push, let's go ahead and send it. There we go. So that's all of Push 101. Very easy to get set up, very easy to compose a push visually. And we can use it to cast very broad nets. So let's go ahead and switch to the next slide. And we'll talk about advanced targeting. So advanced targeting is about sending a very focused message to a much more specific group of people. You can use this with the push console we just looked at as well, as long as you're a pro user. And you can target by any arbitrary features you want, not just the name of a channel. This is particularly useful if either your targeting information is very complex, for example, the location of the device, or if you want to target someone based on the union of many features, or if you might want to target people by principles that you don't know of ahead of time. So another advanced feature that I love is the ability to send a push scheduled to a certain time. And not only can you say, send this push at 5 o'clock in Pacific Standard Time, but you can actually say, schedule a push to go at 5 o'clock everywhere. We call this local push. With local push, it's great, for example, if you have an app and you want to notify someone of their birthday, of their friends' birthdays. And in this case, it would be very rude to wake someone up at 3 o'clock in the morning to say, by the way, your friend in London has a birthday today. But if we say schedule it at 10 o'clock in the morning everywhere, then Parse will wake up to 40 times the day to manage all the different time zones in the world to see if there's any recipients who are currently in that time zone and send the push. But let's go ahead and look at how advanced targeting works. And in order to do that, I want to look at this subscribe method again and actually see how it's been built. And so we're actually going to look at the real source code. Don't tell anyone I'm leaking stuff from the .NET implementation. And I like using .NET just because it's easier to put on a slide because the asynchrony is actually very well done. So we get to say public static task. And task just means this is an asynchronous function. Subscribe async. The IEnumerable of strings is just a loose way of saying I want an array, a list, a set, some set of strings. And the cancellation token is just used to help us manage the canceling of an HTTP request later. But the next line, where we say installation equals parse installation.current installation, is where a lot of the magic is going to happen. We'll explain the parse installation in a second, but it's a parse object, which means we can do to it anything we can do with a parse object. And so we do. We say add range unique to list, and we put the channels parameter into the channels field of the installation. And what add range unique to list does is it adds things to a collection, ignoring duplicates both client-side and server-side. And then we just save. And that's all you have to do to subscribe to a channel. Well, if that's how we subscribe to a channel, I wonder if we can use this for more. Well, the installation is a parse object, as I said. But it's a special parse object. The installation represents the install of your app on this phone. So you'll have separate installations if you have separate versions of the app on your phone, and you'll have separate installations for each phone that your app is installed on. And because it's a parse object, you can save any data you wish that you could on a parse object. And with that, we also do automatic feature tracking. So when you save an installation, we'll automatically save what device type it is. We'll automatically save what time zone it's in. We'll also automatically save the name of the app that's running, which is really useful if, for example, you have a freemium version of your app and a pro version of your app. And that way you can send a push that is only relevant to that segment of the audience. And you can create queries for these objects. Now the caveat here is that we don't actually let you execute the query unless you use the master key. And really this is to protect your customers. The Parse installation, because it's likely to have personally identifiable information, could be a target for attack. So we make sure you can't actually run any queries on this if your app keys ever get leaked. Because realistically speaking, it's very easy to get an app key, and you should design your application so that it's impossible for someone to do something malicious even with those keys. But you can create the query, and we'll see later how you can use that query to tell Parse exactly who you would like to target. And so we're going to go ahead and demo advanced targeting for you using that iOS sample we had just built. So if we go back to our app, we know that pf push is actually sugarcoating around the installation object. So let's go ahead and rewrite some of the code that we had for pf push using pf installation. So let's get the current installation. And let's replace store device token with current set device token from data. And subscribing to channel is easy because channels are a common property of installation. And we have proper subclassing in our Parse objects. So you can just say current.channels is an array of, let's use the broadcast channel and also the PDD channel. And let's also go ahead and add a new feature. Say current character is River Song, for those of you Whovians out there. And let's go ahead and save it in background. So now our phone is using advanced targeting. It's subscribed to the same things it has before, but an additional channel using the installation class. And it also is now the phone for River Song. So if we go back to our push console, when we say send a push, we can, instead of sending it to everyone, send it to a selective segment of our audience. And so channels, we can say we want either broadcast or PDD. We can say we want to have character be River Song. Say Yowza. And if we want to send it later, we can also say send at a specific time. September 5th, 2 o'clock, a couple minutes from now, or you can say 2 o'clock everywhere by just clicking that checkbox. But for the sake of a demo, let's go ahead and send it now. I don't know if you could hear that. It said Yowza. So that's advanced targeting. So let's go ahead and move on to Parse 301. Next slide, please. So in 301, we're going to start pushing from code. And the idea here is our app becomes more engaging when you send a push that is much more specific to a smaller audience. And certainly, you're not going to scale to 10 million users if you're crafting all these push notifications from that console. So we're going to go ahead and be a life hacker. And we're going to write our app to automatically understand that after particular events, we should send a push. And the idea here is that we can automate everything and reach a massive scale and still give this feeling that we're a very fun, tailored app. And by doing this, we're sending more pushes to fewer people and creating a much more engaging user experience. My favorite thing about this is really when you start breaking platform boundaries. And I've come to expect that big brand websites like Facebook and Parse.com can do some magic behind the scenes. But when I send a push from a device and it reaches another device, that's just cool for me. Although it's great to do in a hackathon, though, I would actually recommend checking out the next talk and seeing how to send a push from Cloud Code. All of our APIs can send pushes, but the great thing about doing it in Cloud Code is twofold. First off, you're going to save yourself some redundancy. Rather than tacking along push API calls sprinkled throughout your code, you can do it in what we call an after-save trigger. So we call these pushes transactional pushes inside Parse. It's because usually you've created an object, and there's a push that lets you know this object exists. So for example, you might have liked a photo, and you send a push that something has been liked. Or you can create a message in a chat app and say, by the way, this chat is now fresh. And so an after save trigger is a great way to consolidate all these events in one part of your code. The other benefit is it's actually more secure. Like I said, we should always assume that it's possible for our client keys to be leaking. But if we put code inside the cloud code, that doesn't leak. It's never going to our customers. And we actually have a security feature called client push enabled that says the key that is used on your iOS, your Android, your Windows apps are not sufficient to send a push. And what that means is you're not going to have to worry about some malicious user deconstructing your app and using your credentials to send messages that you don't approve of. So really, this is a great way to make sure that your app is robust and secure for future-proofing. But like I said, .NET is a lot easier to put on a slide, so let's look at the .NET code for sending a push. So the code to send a push to everyone is very simple. We're just going to say, send alert async. If we use this code, it will send the message, hello world, to all of our users. We could add a second parameter, and that would be the channel of our push. And that would let us narrow it down to something like the broadcast channel, the PDD channel, or another predefined interest group. We can also, however, use the advanced targeting feature in code. If you remember, I said we can create a query for our Parse installation even if we can't execute it. And that's what we do for advanced targeting. So let's say we want to have Windows users send a push to all iOS users over 21, inviting them for a drink to bury the hatchet. Windows fan to Apple fan, let's grab a drink. And so our second parameter will be a Parse installation. Or sorry, a query for Parse installation. So we say from installation and parse installation.query. And this syntax here is called LINQ, or Language Integrated Query. It's a feature of .NET code where you can use a SQL-like syntax to express a request, and Parse conforms to this LINQ protocol. So we say, from installation in parse installation.query, where installation.device type equals iOS. Now we can use this syntax because installation is a subclass of parse object, and it has the property device type. If you want to use additional data, you can either create another subclass of parse installation that knows this special type, and then LINQ will be able to use things like equals and literal, or it can use the generic accessor and say, where installation.get type int of age is greater than 21. And then we just pass that query to parse. And then out of bound, we'll execute this query, and as we get results, we'll send the information, or we'll send pushes to those users. So if 101 was creating an app that has a very simple sender, 201 is creating an app that has a more complex, or sorry, a receiver, and 201 is creating an app with a more complex receiver. 301 is automating the sender. Well, 401 is getting rid of the notification in push. If we really think about it, push is more than just a UI. It's a transport mechanism. And you can really think of the fact that this device kicked that device as an RPC call, a remote procedure call. And many of you may have written an app where you're checking once every second for a new update in a chat room. Well, that's really expensive. And the reason why is now your costs are scaling based on the number of active users and not the amount of flow going through your app. So I love the strategy of really backing off the polling interval. And you might still want one because push can't be guaranteed. But usually actually sending a push that says, hey, there's new information in this chat room. And all the operating systems have these callbacks where you can intercept the push that's been received if the app is in the foreground. And what that means is you can be refreshing automatically. Don't be a drag to refresh. Catch that something has changed. In our previous example, we said send alert async. But you can actually send entire data packets. So alert is just a helper. We send a full dictionary down, and the alert key is the message that will show up in that notification. You can actually send any information you would like. And so you can use that information to let the app know what has changed in the background, and it can then refresh on demand. What's even great is we don't have to have this be a mutually exclusive experience. We can send the alert key, and we can send this extra data. And what that means is if the user's already using the app, if they're already in this chat room, we'll go ahead and show the new chat item. But if they're not in the chat room, then they'll get the notification, and it will draw them back into our app. This is a really great way of making these moments in our apps very engaging. It really frees the user up to leave if content is stale, and the moments they spend in your app are much more exciting, much more engaging, and much more rewarding. And so this is really what I think is a great way to combine my favorite push features. So when we really start at the beginning, we should think big. Think at cloud scale and realize that our app should always be running, or at least have that appearance. But rather than letting it be an unnerving experience, we should make sure that we try to let the users have a very calming experience where content takes the foreground, and we simply draw them back in when there's highly relevant content. If you check out our Push Quick Start guide, it will help you get started very easily, and you can go with the basic targeting for most of your scenarios. But if you need, you can use advanced targeting to send very, very specific information to very dynamic groups. But it's always good to automate this system. It will help you send the most relevant messages to the most specific groups of people. And obviously, if you know that something is new, if you've received a push that says there's a new chat message, why not go ahead and update our UI? This is really a good way to make sure we have this nice calming experience. And so I wanted to thank you guys for coming by and hearing me talk about push, and really open up the floor for any questions you might have. We have? Surely there's some questions, yeah. Can you get a microphone?
Okay. Hi. So with the new ability to do background, schedule a job every night, can I do that, schedule a job every night, and then actually send out push notification based on how I pull the data and say I want to push to these users?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, if
thank you.
Yeah. The new background jobs are fully functional parse functions. You can do anything you would in the cloud environment already. And you can send pushes from a parse function that you either call explicitly, or you can send the push notification, like I said, from an after save trigger and from a background job. You can also, if you know, for example, that a push should be sent based on activity that happened in the day, you don't need to wait for that night to schedule the job. You can send a delayed push by setting the scheduled time in the cloud code as well. So, any other questions?
Hi. A lot of the examples that you showed are about using channels to send them out to groups of users. How easy is it to send directed notifications to certain users that are not inside of a channel?
So that would be part of advanced targeting. And I used a very simple example where I use an arbitrary string. But you can actually save a user to an installation. Or what I like to do is just use a relation of user to installations if you plan on having one user with many devices. And then you can create a nested query. So you do a query based on the user, and then say installations where the user matches the results of this query.
OK, so channels aren't required for that?
No. Some people have created channels based on, for example, the username, which is unique within Parse, or the user ID, and that's perfectly acceptable too. But if you want to actually have additional information about the users you're targeting, so for example, users who are in San Francisco, then you'd want to look at advanced targeting.
Would it scale to continue to use the channels per user like that, or is that something you guys recommend?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
OK.
Yeah, channels are extremely efficiently represented. And one of the things I actually like about using push to channel is because it's such a common pipeline, it means that I can actually do a lot of work to make sure it's fast for you.
OK, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Any advanced requirements you guys have? You have a question back there, it looks like. Oh, and here.
So with the new analytics thing, can you see metrics on who's turned off push notifications for your app or that kind of stuff, so you can see sort of how you're doing with your push notifications, if you're getting people to turn them off, or if they're turning them off because you're hitting them too often, or with bad content or things like that?
Certainly. So in iOS, you have the application did fail to register for remote notifications, I believe, event. And you can use a custom event with analytics to do that. Also, one thing I failed to mention is that Parse Analytics has already come with push features. Christine will be talking about that later today. But when we track app opens, we also track app opens directly related to a push. And we have some extra features related around that where you can not only see the app opens directly to pushes versus generic app opens, but Pro and Enterprise customers have additional insight into the individual push. When you look in that push console, you can see the rate of people who have opened that specific push over time. Yeah.
Is there a way to also see if, or a way to pause your notifications, your push notifications, if they haven't responded in a while? So you can turn them off, but is there a way to pause them if, say, a user hasn't been responding, or if a user responds regularly, increase push notifications on a different level?
That would be something you could probably build yourself. My favorite thing, someone had just come to me about cloud jobs and saying, I would like to stop sending notifications to users who haven't opened my app in a certain time period. And so that would be a great case for using background jobs, where you can create a query with the master key, which means you can actually iterate over the results. That would say, find me all Parse installations where updated at is less than now minus 2 weeks. And then you would just set a disabled bit to true. And then when you actually load the app, you would always save that disabled bit to false. And then with advanced targeting, you can always say, send pushes only where disabled is not true. That's another thing. You can also set maybe a verbosity level as well, where you can say, well, maybe this type of engagement is really critical. So this is something that should go to all verbosity levels. But maybe I want to consolidate friend requests, and if they have a verbosity level of 5, there's a 1 in 5 chance that I actually want to send the push. And so you can put that in your cloud code.
Is there a way to send push messages to a custom geofence?
Yes. So the way it's most commonly done is you would save the location of the device inside the Parse installation, and then we actually have geoquery support in our query language. So you can say where position is within 100 feet of the marquee.
Thank you. You mentioned push 401. Mm-hmm. What did you say is coming up in push 501? Can you talk a little about that?
This is probably not the appropriate topic to talk about unreleased features, or forum to talk about that. I can say I'm excited, and there's a reason why I love working on push, though. Any other questions? OK. Well, thank you guys very much for attending. We have an ice cream social break right now, so if we exit the hallways this way, we have, I believe, Cold Stone serving us some ice cream. So thank you very much.